We do have some prayer cards back on the table, and I have a sign-up sheet back there. I think it seems like your church does a fairly good job of information flow. The church gets the letters and seems to get the information out to you, but if you prefer to get something directly to you, you can put your name on that list out there, and we'll be glad to add you to that. When I send out the letter, those four all make their way into the PowerPoint pictures because they're all part of our church there at City View. Our youngest, Nate, just headed off to college, but he's living at home, attending Cleveland State. He's in an engineering program there. Our daughter is a second-year teacher in Cleveland, and she's still living at home, although she's looking for a house, and so hopefully that'll come together for her soon. And then we have a third teary-eyed the last week of school in the spring as she drove our son to school, and she was thinking about all the times that she had done that, and I tried to be both sympathetic and reasonable, and I said, I know, I get it. I said, but 2 weeks from now, all three of them are still going to be living with us. So we're not quite at that empty nest stage, but we want to, secondly, talk to you a little bit about how do we meet people? What are the entry points into our ministry? How do we engage folks in conversation? Then secondly, where are our opportunities to then take those entry point conversations and communicate to people, communicate the gospel, teach, preach, have personal conversations, and then finally, for those who come to Christ or at least are interested in learning more, where are our discipleship opportunities? And I will, at each of those stages, I'll probably give you a prayer request or two, and so if you're one who's here, that your name would be lifted up in both places. You are worthy of our worship. You are worthy of our praise. And then, Lord, would you help us as we participate in worship to have hearts for you and hearts for others, both here and in Cleveland. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, I don't need to leave our picture up on the screen for very long because we're here, okay? I went to a lot of churches, about 4 years on the road, 125,000 miles or so to raise our support, and so still planting in the downtown area. The rest of our team, one of the things that we've really focused upon for a number of years is leadership development, both leadership that would be more of elder type leadership, staff type, because that's our daughter Julia, but she eventually married Pastor Caleb. So Caleb Kudlow, I know some of you know the Kudlow family. And so Caleb, the way that we met him is he became part of our campus Bible fellowship Bible study when he was a freshman. And actually, Ken had met his family a couple weeks before. He was speaking at family camp at Camp Patmos, and Jeff Cudman. And this was a real blessing for us because the best way to put it is the first couple weeks of church planting, our music was brutal, okay? We didn't have anybody to really lead it well. We tried, we sang, but Caleb was a classical piano major, very gifted musically, and very shortly took over our whole music program. And he's been doing it for a long, long time, other than he did live in Israel, encouraged them in the faith. And so Caleb is now working on his second doctorate in different theological areas and is just a huge blessing to our ministry. You'll see a lot of youth activity. He and Julia lead a lot of that youth activity out of their home. And so we'll show you that in a little bit as well. This is Pastor Jesse and his wife Mackenzie. A common theme here, master's degree at Liberty, and got a job at Camp Patmos where Caleb was working. They became very good friends. And for the couple of years where Caleb worked there, on Sundays, we had a lot of the young people from Patmos would make the drive to Cleveland and would come to our church. And eventually added him to our staff. We all share responsibilities. We don't have hard and fast, you're this pastor or that pastor, except for a couple of areas. I never lead music. Okay, and Caleb almost always leads music for us, but that's because he's really good at music. So there's a lot. He also leads a discipleship-oriented Bible study out of his home, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. The newest member of our preaching and pastoral team is Matt Horsfall. I know some of you know the Horsfall family, I think, from Northfield. Matt was just licensed as a pastor. He finished a master's degree and has done a lot of preaching for us for a number of years. So our people think it's normal. I know this would seem strange in other settings. We actually preach on a 5-person rotation as a licensed pastor to the team and having a special service to honor him as well. And then I just have to throw this in because I can't help it. The real 2 newest members of our team are both of our younger pastors who are married, had babies, who are both about a year and a half old. Jonah is Pastor Jesse's little guy. He's a month older than Jubilee, who is our granddaughter. And our Indian students, one of them had been in India and brought them back Indian-oriented clothing for their sizes and childproofing that we weren't used to in the past. If you look behind Jesse and Caleb, you'll see the wall. And that wall is just one of the things we like to do is we try to keep pictures up there of everybody who's currently coming regularly and a lot of our sort of church histories up there of just people from the past that we've known and loved and prayed for and have been part of our family. We stole a few of those pictures and put them out on our table, but so they'll get to church and there'll be a couple holes on the wall, but that's temporary. All right, so that's our leadership structure. We have been working through what we hope to be a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. And as part of that, we've spent a lot of time discussing who we want our church to be, what we want our church to be like. But the starting process is really thinking carefully through our values. And when I say this, all churches that are, really following after Jesus have common purposes, common stuff that we're supposed to be heading towards, like the Great Commission. But that looks differently in every setting. It looks differently based upon the giftedness of the people you have. It's different based upon the culture you're in. It's different based upon the experiences that you've had. And so recently we've been working through a process to try to figure out what makes City View City View. What are the things that we don't negotiate about, that we're not areas as well as we wish we would. But our first real focus is we strongly believe in showing Jesus to people by the way that we interact with them, by the way that we treat them, by the way that we love them. And for us, we refer to that as sacrificial hospitality. And so a lot of the things that we do with others in mind. We do them in a way that, we don't always organize things the way we would prefer or the way we were used to. We're constantly thinking, how can we glorify God, but how can we show love and hospitality to those who don't know him? And so one of the ways we do that is we do not organize all of the activities and the outreaches that we do and expect people who have no affiliation with church to walk in our church doors. That is becoming more and more unlikely for a lot of the people that we work with. And so one of the things we do is we've specifically targeted low-income buildings. This is a building called the Allerton Building. It's at 13th and Chester. This is a pretty nasty building inside right now. We were just in recently again to Flyer, and it's very poorly kept for the residents. You probably don't want to give yourself a drug test when you walk out of the building just from walking through the halls. I mean, we've walked through the halls when we've stepped around blood. We've walked through the halls when we've stepped around puddles of urine. We are pretty quick to get our clothes washed and our shoes off when we come out of this building because it has a pretty serious bed bug problem. So there are a lot of, this is not a fun place to live, but it's full of people. And for years it was full of a lot of young kids. And so up at the top, there is a room that we still have access to do some ministry. But lately, a lot of the ministry we've been doing with this building is combined with an outdoor park ministry that I'll show you. But what we do, one of our strategies is simply find other people's spaces that we can get access to so that we can meet people, so that we can show them love, so that we can introduce ourselves and then try to draw them into Bible study or coming to church or whatever it might be, whatever that next step is. We flyer this building during the summers for a park ministry. So in addition to going into other people's spaces, we try whenever possible to use common spaces that are available to everybody, like public parks. This is a park 2 blocks from our building, and we have lots of sports equipment, we have lots of cooking equipment, a nice grill, we have tents, we have all kinds of stuff that we keep in a trailer at Pastor Caleb's house, and he drives it down one night a week, and we set up in the park. We invite those from our church, we invite those from the Allerton building, and we also get a decent number of internationals from Reserve Square downtown who will stop over. So on a normal night during the summer, you'll have about 20 or so from our church stopping in there to meet people, to play with kids, to have conversations. And then it can be anywhere from 20 to 40 or 50 other people who will stop by, and we'll get the chance to meet them. We have literature out on the table. We get to invite them to church, things like that. Some of these, like these kids, are long-term relationships. We've known these kids from the Allerton building since they were teeny tiny. We've had them, we used to run a second worship service each week that was more of a teen service in a different neighborhood, and these kids were often picked up and taken to that service. So these are kids who've heard the gospel a lot over the years, have had a lot of interactions with us. We mainly see them now during the summer at the park ministry. There's a music. We've sometimes taken the piano the 2 blocks over to the park, guitars. We have a lot of instruments from India that our Indian students like to use, and so sometimes we do music there. As you can see, Caleb can play just about anything, so that's always good. And then some nights we just serve ice cream, some nights it's just popsicles, some nights we kind of discreetly put the Camp Chef grill in there and make turkey dogs and hot dogs and other things. And so we run this from the week that Cleveland schools are let out in the summer, and we end it the week before the kids go back to school. We meet a lot of people this way, just a lot of interactions. It's not a heavy-duty place where you're getting tons of opportunities to go through the full gospel with people, although we do get in those kinds of conversations at the park. But it's a place where we make friendships that do at times lead to people coming to services. And we actually have a number in attendance now who that's where we met them, okay? And they're now regular parts of the church family. So hospitality to us occurs in other people's spaces. It occurs in common spaces. And then, too, let me just, you can see the green space there and just some of the games. One of the things we've had to learn to do is we've now purchased cricket equipment, because we have a lot of Indian students and young people, and I still don't understand all the rules or quite how to play it. Pastor Caleb gets invited to, recently the United States had a big cricket upset. They upset Pakistan, and all the Indian students who come to our services were very excited about that. But then India was playing the U.S. next, and so they had Pastor Caleb over to watch, and he didn't understand the rules, but he did understand that the U.S. lost. Okay, and they were very much better, humble fans than I would be if my team had won. They didn't want to rub it in or make Caleb feel bad. So, portable basketball hoops, just a lot of equipment that God has blessed us with. Another area outside of our building that we do a lot of ministry, this is the parking lot outside of Pastor Caleb and Julia's house in the Detroit Shoreway neighborhood. And so they open this up every other week for a porch or inside Bible study, a meal, and for the kids to just play for a number of hours. And so there's a lot of equipment. The parking lot actually belongs to a Spanish-speaking ministry that doesn't feel like they have good outreach in that neighborhood, and so they just said, you can do whatever you want in that parking lot. And so that's been nice. We've stolen some I had to get Jubilee in again, driving her little car. I don't have a great picture of it, but if you see the basketball hoop in the background, Caleb goes over and helps with music at Faith 3 weeks out of 4, and so he's very familiar with the basketball court that some of you saw yesterday, and so we've been stealing their ideas. And so we also have been able to put in a hoop very similar to what they have. And you probably noticed yesterday all of the benches and tables and things that are set around that basketball court. John, what's the number one rule? It can't be portable, right? Because if it's portable, it will probably disappear. And so same kind of thing. You see the bench there is a very heavy bench. We've got very heavy trash cans, very heavy picnic table for ministry there, but stuff that can't walk away very easily. Before we had this hoop installed, Caleb has very nice security cameras, and he woke up one morning to watch the security cameras to see one of our basketball hoops being wheeled down the street. And so that's part of what you have to think about when you're trying to do ministry. This is a porch Bible study there. Again, you can just see lots of kids, lots of people eating the meal. Caleb there teaching on the porch. Just give you a sense of what that's like. When the weather is colder, they pack everybody into their space, into their living room and their dining room for the meal and the Bible study. And it ends up, it's really geared towards a lot of middle school students, but it ends up with little ones through adults, depending upon who comes and the week. And Jubilee gets into the mix of everything. She thinks it's great to have kids all over her house. Okay, so in the building itself, sitting around a table together is very, very important. We have lots of people who do not have intact families, do not have a lot of family connections that are healthy or that they see often. And so they really do talk about the church family as their family. And so once we have snacks together almost every Sunday, a lot of coffee gets consumed. But then once a month, the last Sunday of the month, instead of having second hour like Sunday school and Bible studies, we do a fellowship meal together. And so you can just get a sense of what that's like. Every quarter, the Indian students cook for us. And so they say that Pastor Jesse's bald head sweats too much if they make it too spicy, and they're really worried about him. So they do tell us that it's much milder than what they would normally cook, but it's had some good kick to it a few times. And so that's a lot of fun for us to enjoy the meals together. And then even just the hospitality, part of the reason that we have a lot of Indian students coming now is because when the first ones came, our young people were super hospitable to them. They involved them in everything that they were doing. They had them to their homes for meals and to watch football games and to just whatever it was. And that has just helped the momentum keep going from year to year. All right, so the two biggest prayer requests in this area, one would be for our Indian students. We really would like to increase the discipleship focus of that ministry, but one of the things that is continually happening is the students graduate and they have been unable to secure jobs in Cleveland. And so we have a number of them, and we have one in Delaware now. We've had some move to Michigan. We have several living in Indianapolis right now. And we really are just praying that some of them will be able to get long-term jobs in the area, which is their desire and our desire too, because there are several of them who are becoming equipped to lead and to do outreach. But if they keep getting moved on, then you're starting over with new students. And then secondly, we do a lot of the people that we're hospitable to, we get the opportunity to build relationships with and to go on to these next steps. But there's also a lot of them, like Sunday morning at 8:30 we open up, church isn't until 9:30, and often the first 20 to 25 people who come have no intention of staying for a service, accessing spiritual conversations, accessing spiritual content. They just want a snack and a cup of coffee, and we try to love on them and be hospitable. But that also means that there are some interactions that aren't always positive. There are people that we have to step in and say, please don't take 10 bananas. Please don't take all the clothing off of the table. And one of the individuals recently that we had several of those hard conversations with, then he didn't show up last week, and we found out that he had died of an overdose during the week. And it really hit several of us hard because he's somebody that wasn't open to the gospel, but we also wonder, are we doing enough to try to start those conversations, and how could we do that better? So just pray that the Lord might give us wisdom and opening in some of those lives. All right, a second point of emphasis is from those hospitable entry points, we also try to have a lot of teaching and preaching opportunities, places where we can direct people towards Jesus, towards the gospel. We try to make sure that it doesn't matter what part of the Bible we're speaking from or teaching through, we're trying to show people where that fits into the larger story and how desperately unbelievers and believers need the grace of Jesus, need the power of the Spirit. Those types of themes, those types of gospel themes. Let me find where I'm at. I already showed you the porch Bible study, but, Caleb is very professorial when he teaches. He likes to use a lot of slides and a lot of questions, but he's constantly trying to ask the kids questions to direct their hearts towards Jesus. We have a Bible study at Cleveland State. Last semester, it wasn't super well attended. This semester, it's been great. We've had almost 25 every week. I know you also support Mary Amesbury. So Mary is the boss. She's the ministry coordinator. She cooks the food. She works with the students to make decisions. I'm the main speaker, and I'm currently, because I work part-time at CSU, I'm also the faculty advisor, although I'd like that to go to somebody else as well. But a good opportunity. Some semesters there's crossover with who comes to our church from this group. Other semesters, there's no crossover, but you already heard how a lot of our leaders that God has given us now have come through this ministry. Just a couple pictures of that. And then I mentioned to you the 5-person preaching rotation. There's Pastor Jesse, I think, was preaching that Sunday. There's Pastor Caleb preaching about the resurrection on a different Sunday. And so one of the things that we've started doing is every Friday, twice a month by Zoom, twice a month over breakfast, those of us who are preaching, we meet and we talk about the sermon from the previous week. And so we have certain things that we're striving to do in our sermons. Have we clearly communicated the gospel? Have we given people walk-away points that they can understand and that they can hang on to? And so it can be a little intimidating. My sermon was the focus this Friday. Everybody's talking about your preaching, talking about what you've done, but we're doing it intentionally because we want to be accountable to putting the time in to preparing messages that feed people and that help them to understand the gospel. And because we want to make sure that since it's not the same person preaching every week, that we're building upon each other. We're keeping it. Right now we're in the book of Acts, and we want every message to help people not only understand that passage, but the whole book, the whole theme. Where is it heading? All right, and so a number of opportunities like that, places that we're holding Bible studies, that we're preaching and that we're teaching. And then thirdly, this area of becoming like Jesus, gospel-centered discipleship, which means that we want to make ourselves part of a community that is encouraging and admonishing and teaching, but we want to be discipling others. We want to be helping them to become what Jesus wants them to be. And so this will give you a little sense, a lot of discipleship in a smaller church. And we don't often think this way. Not all discipleship has to be one-on-one. Not all discipleship has to be small groups. People learn a lot through the common practices of the church. I've listened to a message that my wife sent me recently because I was reading a book with the same theme. It talks about gospel-centered messages and preaching at the same time that we're developing a gospel-centered culture. A culture of love, a culture of grace, a culture of community. And so we're trying to put a lot of value on what we do together. What are we teaching that we don't even realize we're teaching through how we structure our Sunday morning services and how we interact with one another and those sorts of things. This was our Christmas party last year. It was a very nice December day, so we could do some things outside. We did some Christmas caroling in December right outside the building. But, just those common practices. And then doing a lot of things in small group setting. This was our group of high school and college graduates this year. Several of the Indian students. Matt had graduated with his seminary degree, and then the young guys who live at our house with their high school degrees, just honoring the fact that they've taken those next steps and then encouraging them to the next steps beyond that. This was the Camp Patmos Men's Retreat this year. I know several of you were there and met our group, and they had a great time together, just a diverse group. Some of them not sure they're believers yet, some of them mature believers, some of them sort of in the middle. One of the guys from a low-income building gathered them together every night, late at night, and he said, we've got to talk about the message, and we've got to pray about the message. And so just those opportunities together to work through the scriptures, to work through what they had heard, and that was one of their late night sessions at the basketball court at Patmos. And then sometimes the discipleship is stepping into situations like here, two young people graduating from CSU, no family able to come from India, but they wanted the pastors and wives to be there as their extended family here in the U.S. And that's part of discipleship too, just loving people, showing them that you value what they value and that the things that they're working on, that you care about. This guy, Steve, he's in a nursing home now. He was part of our church for many years from one of the low-income buildings, and so at least once a month I take him shopping. He got me started on a Bible study in the nursing home he used to live in, and he doesn't live there anymore, but there's so many people coming, I hate to give it up. And so I take Steve to it every once in a while because he's sort of a celebrity in the building, and he comes back to his former home and they're all glad to see him. But that's discipleship too, just going to where people are and trying to pray with them, trying to encourage them. Just a couple pictures of the building, and then I'll give you some prayer requests related to discipleship. We are at the intersection of 13th and Superior is the facility that we rent. So this is the picture from the Reserve Square side. We had a supporting couple in Medina who own a sign company, and they nicely put our logos up on all the windows for visibility. The front of our building, we are attached to the left of all those flower pots, or weed pots usually, but there's a low-income building that's full of people, and we get a lot of people from that building who walk down and come to church. And then on the back side of the building, you'll see a school called the Promise Academy. You can be praying about that. We're investigating some possible ways to have a greater outreach into the school and into the lots of students who go there and walk past the building every day. But we've done a few things with them, but not a lot. So from the discipleship standpoint, God has blessed us with the ability to create a pipeline of leaders, of young men who know how to preach, are learning how to pastor, who have those sorts of degrees. And we have a lot of young people, particularly young professional young ladies, who are becoming very proficient at ministering and talking to and having gospel conversations with people from low-income backgrounds and buildings. But we have not been, we have long-term attenders and even members who've come out of some of these buildings who are now walking with the Lord. We haven't been as successful at creating leaders from these buildings. And so that's sort of our next phase that we're trying to figure out how to do that. And so you can be praying for us in that area. Our biggest conversation heading into 2025 is what will discipleship look like for us in 2025? Will we reallocate some of our finances? Will we reallocate some of our time as a leadership team to more intentionally doing some additional small group discipleship and one-on-one discipleship and just looking at that whole area of our ministry? And so we'd really appreciate prayers for that process. All right, so I'm going to ask Natalie to come up, and I've been told that you're good at asking questions, and so we would love for you to do that. All right.
I know we said no questions till tonight, but Bill and Natalie can't be here tonight, so you're allowed to ask questions now. Thank you for tremendous. Anybody here didn't learn something just now? Or your heart wasn't maybe challenged just a little bit? If your heart wasn't challenged a little bit, I don't think you're listening. Natalie, come up too. I understand Bill's going to have you answer all the questions.
The hard ones. She thinks pretty well on her feet, so I can't remember names if somebody asked me who it was, just because it hides.
Let me say to both of you on behalf of the church family, thank you for what you're doing. We're pleased to be part of your ministry, but when we hear this kind of presentation, I think we swell a little bit with our
Thank you.
joy.
Thank you.
And thank you for, since so many of our leaders come from Campus Bible Fellowship, we know you were in the early stages of that, so
Go.
at CSU.
Got my heart going a little bit there. Okay, questions? Right here, Leela. For others, the question is, moving from outreach where you're trying to get people in to outreach that has that word out in it, going out to them, and permissions and ideas. So great question, Leela.
Why don't you go first on that one?
The outreach in public spaces actually started because we had a mom and some children in that high-rise, and we recognized that the children had no place to play. And so we just encouraged one mom and her kids one summer. I think she was the only faithful one. We found some green space, and we just started playing and realized the value of that. So we don't ask for permission. We just show up in those public spaces. We're getting bigger now. I don't know if that'll cause us a problem if they make us do a permit, but we're not selling anything. Everything's free. We're there and we're gone in about 2 hours, but we're there consistently. I think the big benefit is that, I don't know what it would be like here, but where we are, there are so many people reaching out and they want to shake your hand and say hi and then share the gospel. And that is not necessarily the most beneficial thing because there's no relational capital, there's no consistency. People are looked at as, oh, you just want me to say yes to this. And we have those people pass through. They'll just go, oh, yes, I'm coming to church, I'm coming to church. And we know, like, no, you're not. Not right now. You don't even know us. So I think going with the right intention is important. It is valuable to know somebody's name. It is valuable just to meet somebody and recognize God is sovereign. He's bringing this person into relationship with us. We don't necessarily need to see the whole gospel presented and have somebody come to Christ and call it a victory. If I walk away having represented Christ well, having loved well, and know a person's name, that's probably a really good start. And small is good. 5 people, 2 people, God gives the increase.
Let me follow up on that. Let me follow up because you just said some places kind of came. But from the pictures, there's an intentional, you have equipment and things you take there. So what, did that grow? Did you just suddenly invest in a bunch of stuff? Or how did you, because you set up in a pretty nice way.
Right. Let me clarify one thing. When we're going into other people's buildings, like where they live, there does have to be permission or an invitation from residents. It is a lot easier to get that permission in CMHA buildings and HUD buildings. It's almost impossible to get it in higher end apartments downtown. You know, you have to have a resident who is willing to lead something in a community area. So we do get permission in other people's buildings, but when it's common space, it's common space. We just use it. Now, the second part of that is we've been doing that park ministry probably for 6, 7, 8 years. I can't even remember now. And so it died down during COVID. We couldn't do it, and then the next year back it was very small. It's built back up, and so we've just steadily figured out ways, sometimes through public grants, that we can get equipment because it's just for general service of people. No restrictions on our ability to share religious content. Other times we build it into our budget. Did I forget anything with that?
All the equipment was purchased through some grants that Caleb and I have been in a cohort of training through the Cleveland Foundation, and they have been helpful in allowing us to purchase things that are not worship monies. We're not spending the money so people will worship. We're spending it on what they would term community outreach. So the tent, the grill, a lot of that sports equipment. We used to show up with frisbees and a couple pop-up goals, and now we have some more substantial things.
No, we don't take we don't take everything every week. We vary it from week to week. The kids love some of the simple stuff: bubbles, sidewalk chalk, popsicles. Particularly for a couple of years where we had a lot of students from different, like from Kuwait and from Saudi Arabia, couldn't speak English, but they all learned how to say ice cream. You know, ice cream was a kind of an international word that they learned very quickly. Another prayer request that I meant to mention when I was going through that, one of the neat things that happened this summer, for either 2 or 3 years, we've had a Hindu grandfather and his 2 grandchildren coming to the park every week. And the kids speak fairly good English. He's very limited in his English. But they've started since the summer, they drop by church almost every Sunday. Before school started, they were dropping in on prayer meetings, and they only come for about a half hour. And he'll walk into the service a little bit and sit in the back and take it all in and listen. But they're coming. He's asking for prayer. He wants us to pray for the kids. We can't always tell what he's understanding, just because of the communication. But he asked us for a Bible, which we were able to get a Bible in his native language. And so pray for that for them. We'd love to see them come to Christ.
Other questions? Questions about multi-ethnicities and both reaching out to other groups, and sometimes other groups that don't always get along together. That happens. So the idea of crossing that wonderful barrier.
So let me reflect on observations about us. One of the things that we keep in mind is that basically our community is mostly African American, living around us, and the Indian students that have been coming. So why would I, as a 50-year-old black male living in a low income but high-rise, want to come into a predominantly what we would call a white space? If you walk in and all your leadership is white, All of your pictures are white. All of your worship is very white. So we don't have that situation. We've intentionally tried to be, I don't know how to say it, hospitable, but that means that our walls have, pictures from Black artists. If you walk into our bathroom, there's an artist that I just love, and her artwork is on the wall. We're trying to be as welcoming in our visual space because we're asking people for a really big step to trust us, to come into a place where we love Jesus, we love people, we uplift the dignity of people. But you can't always feel that walking into a space. Like, it's intimidating. How many of you would go into a space where you're the minority, or you are the person that has to acclimate to everything else going on? So that is the cross-cultural aspect of it. The other thing is that we're humble and we're learning. We make mistakes all the time. We have to apologize. We have to say things like, oh, I did not know that. Thank you for sharing that with me. And when you have that posture, the people that are coming into your church will instruct you and tell you where you need to get better. And so I think we learned that way through the years too. And then just friendships. Like when you're in friendship with people, you learn from one another and you get better at being a friend.
Yeah, I think we do care that everything we do leads to ultimate opportunities to share the gospel and to disciple people. We care about that. And so we're not going to do things that don't open up that opportunity. But at the same time, we don't love on people if that is the only result. Like, the relationships need to be genuine. It needs to be, it needs to be like your cousin who does not know Christ and you've loved them all your life and you desperately want them to come to Christ, but they're your cousin and you're going to spend time with them whether they come to Christ or not. And I think that there is just a subtle difference in how that feels when you're on the other end, where this person's not a project, they're not a target, they're somebody that we're trying to meet and authentically love and develop a relationship with, and then let God bear the fruit if that's what God does.
The other thing that I think is really important that we had to learn in hindsight, I'm trying to reflect. We started that ministry for women and children in the HUD high-rise that you saw, the Allerton building. And after 3 years, my friend Cece came to me, and the year before she had given me a Mother's Day card. I've known this girl for 3 years and her children. And after 3 years, we were sitting in one of our groups, and she told me that her mother had been murdered. And I was like, 3 years I've known you, and you're now trusting me with that. There is a trust issue where people don't trust somebody breezing through with a message. But when you love them and you're in their lives, those windows open up. And we saw significant windows open up at 3 years of ministry, just showing up every week, every month, walking beside people, going to court dates, showing up. I visited my friends in jail when they were falsely accused of things and when they weren't falsely accused. I mean, things happen. And so showing up makes the biggest difference. And then 5 years was another plateau where we saw people really start to go, okay, you're here. You're in it to win it. Like, you're with us. And so it's a commitment out the gate, and then it's a long, long game.
Yeah, this isn't the kind of stuff where you just put out the church sign and people flock to you. I mean, we get some of that, but usually it's because somebody's told them that we make really good coffee. It's not coming in with a spiritual hunger. The spiritual hunger is more generated over time by the relationships and the conversations. She mentioned a few things, but school programs we've been to, IEP meetings we've been to, just stepping in, helping people buy cars. Both of us have helped people learn how to drive, and that was scary in both cases, or pass their driver's tests. So it's a lot of that life on life stuff. Do you want us to take one more or wrap up? Okay.
The trap doorbell rang, and we'll all drop together.
Thank you, everybody.
I will say that, yes, teaching someone to drive is the ultimate put your life on the line for the Lord ministry. He doesn't do that early in our time. Let me say you that she's on that. Hardly because she's on the They will be out by the table. We're not able to be with us tonight. So tonight when you come and it's just Faith Baptist Community Center, don't say, well, that was something. We need to let them go.
But we will be back tomorrow.